The lesson isn't always necessarily in the success. The lesson is in the failure.
Happy April, people. Fabian DeMarco, Scar Tissue Podcast. You know the deal. We're past a quarter way through the year. So listen, if you haven't got your act together now with your business, you better hurry up because the times are ticking. I am joined today by a high performance coach by the name of Christian Boucousis. So if you are in need of some clarity, if you're in need of getting your act together in your business, if you're needing some sort of direction, if you're in need in improving the output per input that you're putting into anything in your daily life or work, this is the episode you need to listen to. So Christian Boucousis was a fighter pilot for I believe 10 years, and then he went on to set up his own businesses, which were very successful and innovative in their own way. But he's also become a high-performance coach. So he works with athletes and CEOs all around the country and helps them bring in the lessons and formats that he's learned from being a fighter pilot for so many years and setting up his own business to helping those people and companies and athletes get exponentially more out of the time that they're investing and the ways that they're doing things. So this is definitely the podcast for you. If you've been lagging behind, if you know you can get a little bit more out of your day, out of your week, out of your month, out of your year, then if you're at 100%, don't worry about it. Just turn this thing off. But if you're at 99%, which let's be honest, we're probably mostly running at about a 40%, or 10 maybe. If you're not at the best output if you're not getting the most out of your time right now, this is a podcast you need to listen to. Even if it's just to walk away with one piece of information that's going to change anything, then it's definitely worth your time, right? So this is the one for you. One more thing. If you like this episode, if you like any of my episodes, make sure you tell your friends about it. You jump onto however you listen to podcasts and subscribe. You give us a rating. Hopefully it's a positive one. If not, just don't even give me. I don't want to know. I only want the positive stuff. Okay, that's about it. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with Christian Boucousis.
Around mental performance, though.
Well, you'd want to hope so, I suppose, if you're flying a 20-ton bullet.
Yeah, you're never on top of it. Whereas in what I call life on the ground, we always think that we are capable of doing a lot more, and we are capable of. You want me to do a sound check, mate?
Yeah, that should be working.
1, 2, 1, 2.
1, 2. Yeah, beautiful. Good.
Yeah, so you get because you don't perform at the edge of human performance. You think you know what it is. And most people don't, because you never operate at a level where the mental agility, physical resilience that comes about as being a fighter pilot. And it's not like when you fly, it's not like that all the time. It's like that at certain parts of the mission. And in certain missions, it's 98% boredom, 2% absolute chaos. It's that's why the lessons out of the fighter pilot world are interesting because it's just $15 million to invent and train a fighter pilot. Most people just don't get that exposure.
No, not at all. So wait, but you just said there's 95% of the time boredom. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, 98% boredom, 2%. Well, they call it sheer terror, but we're not supposed to be terrified because we're trained to handle it. So it's more chaos.
Yeah, but even to get to that 98% of where it becomes boring, at one point it wouldn't have been boring, right? I mean, it would have been. I could imagine the first time that you jumped in a plane, let alone with someone, then by yourself.
Look, it's a refined system. It's really interesting. It's there's around about 300 missions that you fly as part of a program from being an ab initio, or from coming in off the street all the way up to being a base level of competency as a fighter pilot. There's probably 300 odd missions that you fly. Every one of them is individually assessed. You're allowed to sort of fail 2 of them, and then you're out. And it's just about understanding that incremental increase in performance all the time. It just doesn't exist in normal world. It just does not exist. No one gets trained to do their job like that. So I think what happens in business and in life, people make all these assumptions on how it works, which is very political and social, which is great. And it's important to be social and political inside organizations, to have the hustle, to find the hack. But when you start amalgamating more and more people in your organization, you start to understand the value of training and alignment and clarity, because you don't, particularly myself in the entrepreneurial world and starting businesses and growing them, you don't always get that equation, which is, well, if I just add a person and there's two people, I'll get double the productivity. It doesn't work.
Right.
And the risk you run is that as you grow and add more people, you actually become less efficient and things become more complex because people don't know the importance of training people to work together.
Right.
So it's quite really interesting, particularly now coming back and coaching large organizations with that pedigree. You see instantaneously areas where simple little changes can improve performance. And that's why I talk about like a 3X. You can 3X performance without really doing anything other than just thinking slightly differently about the way you do things.
Right. Well, that's what we're here for today. Chris, we're live, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, there you go.
We're on.
I thought you tricked me into podcasting there.
Yeah, we're live. No. So when did you get into the Air Force?
So being a pilot for me was something I was passionate about since I can remember. I think I had a brief flirtation in year 9 with being an architect because I like doing graphics, but I always came back to flying. Always had posters on the wall. It was just something that was in my blood. Can't really remember being passionate about anything else. So the first opportunity I had to apply to be a pilot, which was straight out of school, I took. And unfortunately, I didn't do very well in high school, so I repeated my last year. So after I repeated my last year of high school, I was selected to the Army and the Air Force for pilot training. The Air Force screens you. You go and do a little bit of flying to make sure that you don't get sick and you've got some basic aptitude. Yeah. So once you pass through all of that, then you get put on a pilot training program. So I was 19 when I started training as a fighter pilot. And so early 19, and then just as I turned 21, 22, I started flying F-18, started flying jets.
And why did you, from day one, why do you think you wanted to go into the Air Force? So,
look, I think there's an element of adventure. I read a lot when I was younger, and I really gravitated to stories around World War II, Vietnam.
Right.
For me, it wasn't so much about being a pilot; it was being a fighter pilot.
Right.
And that's why when I couldn't be a fighter pilot anymore at the end of my career, when I was diagnosed with a medical condition that meant I couldn't fly anymore, I didn't just want to be a pilot, and that's why I jumped out of
it was
aviation.
That or nothing.
Yeah, well, look, I think if I didn't get through, I probably would have happily flown through my career. It's a 10-year return of service obligation once you finish, so I would have happily flown. I mean, the Air Force is great for doing that, and I'm a pilot now, and I still fly now. I enjoy it, but as a career, for me, it's really the fighter pilot, the challenge of aerial combat and the whole nights of the sky and all of this really challenging environment. As I'm older, I look back, I think that's what really attracted me to it. Yeah. The flying was great, and I like flying now, but it wasn't necessarily just to be a pilot. It was all about being a fighter pilot.
It was about that thrill, which is, it seems there must be something oddly unique. Well, there obviously is. There's something oddly unique and somewhat terrifying about people like fighter pilots and F1 drivers, where you are somewhat addicted to that risk, to that thrill. Without that thrill, you're not getting the same sort of satisfaction. It's kind of what I'm quite hearing from.
Yeah, it's interesting because most fighter pilots, well, let's say all of them, and Formula One drivers, they understand risk and they understand calculating it, and they can calculate it very quickly. There's no fighter pilots or Formula One drivers that go out there to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
It's not part of the equation, and we call that NAFOD, no apparent fear of death. So there's no NAFOD
I like that.
pilots in the Air Force. And I think, and again, it comes back to the conversation we had before around training. Yeah. When you incrementally increase risk, but you build training and the ability to deal with it, the level of risk kind of always stays the same. And when you look at an aircraft, the ultimate get out is an ejection seat. So if we push it to the envelope, the aircraft departs controlled flight, or something happens that's beyond our control, then we can always get out. Now, clearly, combat is very, very different because there's a very real risk in combat that you're not going to come back at all. So it's an interesting one. I think it's kind of hard to deconstruct the psychology of it. I think when you look at people who are in an industry or they have a job that death is a constant companion, I think there's a deep understanding of how to manage that risk and the importance of things like discipline and the basics, and always coming back to simplicity and making sure your ego doesn't become part of the equation, and you understand the importance of a team and how to harness the power of a team. And it comes back to the life lessons. And one of the things I talk about in my programs when we're delivering this fighter pilot message, whether it's to small companies or large companies, is for everyone in that room, they have a choice to think and behave the way that fighter pilots behave and Formula One drivers behave. But for us, there is absolutely no choice. It is the way. And you get trained in the way. And every single pilot goes through exactly the same process. And they pop out at the end, and they're pretty amazing at getting things done. So I think that's the big difference. It is risky if I put you into a fighter jet tomorrow, showed you how to turn it on and go flying. That would be incredibly high risk for you to go and do that, and you probably wouldn't come back. But for a fighter pilot who's been trained in that role, it's not actually that risky at all, because they've learned all the little steps that add up to it. And as I said before, just little things. You would probably find it difficult to believe that in a 4-week period you can teach yourself to learn 400 items off by heart in an exact sequence. Your brain can do that. And that's one of the things about being a fighter pilot, is you're exposed to all of these amazing tricks that your body is capable of that you don't really get that exposure for when you're...
I could imagine how much you would view the human capacity would be exceptional as a fighter pilot. But in the same token, I'd imagine that the Air Force and any military form would have an organic weeding process. So someone like me, if I didn't have the comfort with fear or a comfort with the constant threat of death or an ability to retain certain things or ability to be decisive, if just by not having those things, I think organically you kind of get weeded out till you have this purely disciplined, 100% capable unit. Whereas I suppose, and this is from my experience working in the corporate side of the world, because that risk profile isn't so high, that there can be more fat. You can get someone not at 100% and you go, they're enough. They're good enough. Good enough doesn't work when you're flying an airplane, especially when it's protecting the country. So,
absolutely. And I think in corporates, there's a different appetite for risk. And a lot of people, it's just... life is different. I mean, not everyone needs to lead a life where risk is a big part of it. And, if we all did that, it'd be crazy. We wouldn't be able to cross the road. Someone going through the lights at 200 kilometers per hour. Yeah. So there's a balance, and there's definitely a psychometric element to it. And when you go through this selection process, they are looking for a certain type of person. And again, as I'm older now, I'm 45, and I look back, wanted to be a fighter pilot, only fighter pilot, then an entrepreneur, not working in business, but specifically entrepreneur, own your own business. Everything there has a large degree of risk. But here I am 45 and it's been okay. I've had some good wins, had some big losses, and it's no easy ride. But what I find in a business, when it gets to a point where it's big enough to look after itself, it just becomes a bit less interesting.
So you love that startup phase of
love the startup phase, and you become very experienced at it, and you understand that there's a formula. There is a formula to doing it. And when we talk about that 3x your performance, the formula is you've got to get yourself so efficient, you've got to get your mindset so right, and you've got to be able to do 3 people's worth of work as a single individual. And if you can do that, you will grow the revenue to a point where you can actually start to put people on board. So it's that clarity, and what I love about what you learn as a fighter pilot is how to create clarity around what you want to do. And even if you want clarity, the world will throw uncertainty at you. So it's still chaotic, but you just make slightly better decisions when you have that clarity. And that's all about building a simple plan of where you want to be in a year's time, and just go and execute that and bring people on board. I think one of the challenges, people have great ideas, but there's no clarity around how to actually execute on it. And this is what people don't understand is this concept of execution. Having an idea and all these great thoughts, everyone actually has them. I think people think, well, I'm a great ideas man, or I've just got all these really cool things I'm thinking of. Everyone does that. Having an idea is not actually that hard. And when people talk about being creative, or we need to bring new ideas into our organization, I think what people mean is we've got to come up with some ideas that we can actually execute on and change our business. And that execution phase is the area where most human beings are not very good. We're just not, and we're not designed to do that because that's not in our DNA. We have a survival DNA. We don't have a high performance DNA. And survival DNA is all about sitting around in a cave, making sure you don't get hurt or eaten.
Yeah.
And then all of these little chemicals in your body, your adrenaline, your serotonin, your dopamine, all these chemicals are firing in your body to allow you to take on the risk of going out and hunting something and surviving. So we're kind of used to sitting around doing nothing, having a hustle, because that's the hunter and that's the gatherer. That's the type of DNA that we have. Whereas in the fighter pilot world, what we've realized is you can't, even though that still happens, and even though you have a bad day and your brain doesn't switch on and you're not the most high performance person, on average you are more high performance because you know if you're not, you are going to have an accident. And we can't afford to fly an entire mission on adrenaline alone. We can't afford to trade all of these high-performing chemicals because it's highly fatiguing. So what you learn is if you create structure in the way that you think and you have a specific mindset, which is all about execution, it's not about having the big idea. It's all about the ability to act instinctively. So when your big idea that has a long time frame on it, 1 or 3 years, when you're going towards that goal, you're able to instinctively react to problems every single day and come back to that ultimate destination. So I say to people, you've got a great idea, right? Have you got 3 years to invest in it? Oh, what do you mean? Everything that you do, if you think it's going to take 3 years, then you'll be fine. You'll probably get it done in 6 months. Who knows? But odds on, every new idea, every business venture, every change in a business plan, it is a very long process to actually implement and get done.
And I like that. It kind of
it's a rule of threes. You only try and do 3 things at once. Everything's going to take 3 years, and you can perform 3 times better than anyone else. It's just the fighter pilot mentality, because we know if you try to do more than 3 things, you're never, ever going to get it done. Even more so if you're trying to get it done with a formation or a team. Multiple people, the more you give more people, the more interpretation you have, the more complexity you bring to it. So this rule of threes tends to be a really, really cool way to bring focus back to your life. Because let's face it, by 11 o'clock, most of us are completely snowed under with cash flow or another crisis or some latest tweet from a competitor or bad review on our websites. Everything conspires away from us having clarity, direction, and focus. So this methodology we have, this flex methodology, it's about deliberately coming back to that.
That's the Afterburner methodology?
That's correct. There's a fighter pilot methodology that Afterburner has adapted for use for use in anything, in life, in business, in a charity, at a mine, safety, investing, raising capital. The methodology is just a mindset, a way of thinking that equals more success.
Okay, so take me through that methodology, and it's the clarity. Take me through it.
Clarity. So clarity is what a fighter pilot calls situational awareness.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine, right? Everyone knows what everyone knows what a marble is, right? You play marbles. So imagine if you're on a mission and a marble was an airplane, and they put it on a table, and you're on a mission with 40 aircraft, 40 marbles, and you have to keep track of every single marble the whole time. It's impossible, isn't it? Now add a third dimension. Now put those marbles inside a big fan in one of those, skydiving tubes that you can go and now those 40 marbles, they're not only moving in 2 dimensions, they're moving all over the sky. And you have to keep awareness of everything. It's impossible. So situational awareness is understanding which marble do I need to be looking at right now because I don't want to run into it. And in the context of an aircraft, it's which aircraft out of those 40 aircraft do I need awareness of right now to make decisions so I can act and do something about them. The other 38 marbles, the other 39, I don't need to worry about right now, but I need to know as they come in towards closer to me, I need to have awareness of my situation as I move closer to all of this chaos. So situational awareness is about finding the right information at the right time to make a decision. Might be a bad decision, but you've got to make a decision, and that's going to equal an action. And as soon as that action happens, we'll see what goes on, and we can make another decision. So we're all about making thousands of reversible decisions rather than years and months or days of analysis and making infrequent big decisions that everyone's terrified of turning around, which is the decisions that lead to GFC, the decisions that lead to losing billions of dollars in poor ventures. Everyone gets so vested in it socially, it ultimately becomes a bad idea. So situational awareness is what this whole thing is built on. So you have a situational awareness bubble. That's clarity around what you want to achieve every day. I've got a bubble too. And what we think of is if we're not making good decisions, if we're confused, we need to make that situational awareness bubble bigger. So I've got more clarity of everything around me. And that's how you influence people better. That's how you have better conversations. So that's great to say, I need more situational awareness. And the next question we ask is, well, how do I get it? That's the most important thing. And in the world of a fighter pilot, we don't really talk about what you need to do in a mission. We always talk about how. Because one thing we do in business a lot, one thing we do in our lives is we're really good at checklists. Here's all the stuff I have to do. What we're not very good at is understanding how long and how hard it is to get things done. And this is where we talk about a phrase called more how. How do I do the things I need to do? And when you start thinking about how you're going to do these things, all of a sudden you realize it's going to take a long time. And we all suffer from this thing, cognitive illusion. It's called the optimism bias. And the optimism bias is where we fundamentally believe everything that we're going to do is much, much easier than it really is. Only 8% of people get their New Year's resolution achieved every year. So we've got all these issues. So how do we do it? And that's what the Flex method, the 4 steps are all about, right? And that's building simple plans. We're not talking about complex, multi-documented KPMG external strategies developed to get us to move this big oil tanker of an organization around. Just something real simple. And the thing about the plan is to bring clarity. You can't have situational awareness without clarity. And the clarity is, well, here's where we want to be in a year, and here's what we need to do today to get there. And we build ourselves up for success every single day, rather than waiting till the end of the year where we succeed once.
Right. Okay. So it's essentially a decision-making framework. And
correct.
The principle being Moore's law through indecision, the wrong decision. So we have to make one. You have a framework to do that. This process essentially sets off by going, how do we make it as simple as possible? And how do we start getting momentum on that path to where we need to get
momentum is critical. We call that leaning forward. Right?
Leaning forward. Okay.
Leaning into the problem, keeping momentum, not getting stuck. Because getting things done is really hard. It really is hard. Just physics, everything. Getting a car from 0 to 60 is hard. Yep. Everything expends energy. So the more momentum you have, the more inertia, the less energy it takes to get things done. Mm-hmm. So clarity and situational awareness, first thing you need is a destination. Once we've got that, and we call that, we have a 6-step process to develop that, a clear, measurable, achievable objective for a team of people, the threats to getting it done, the resources we need, what we've learned from the past that we're going to apply in the future. Yep. What's each individual going to do? What am I going to do? And finally, a couple of steps if something goes wrong. We call that planning for contingencies, because inevitably something goes wrong. And if we plan for the worst case scenario, we can generally deal with everything else. And the reason for that is when we come under stress, when something goes wrong, if we don't know what to do, we enter into that fight, flight, or freeze response. And all of a sudden, our brains lose all the blood that they need to think, and it goes into our extremities and into our body.
Right.
So just when we need to think the most, because we're in a high-stress situation, we can't.
We're at our worst to think.
We're at our worst. Our prefrontal cortex is deprived of blood. So we've got to get back to where we need to be. Then the second step in the process is briefing. What you and I are doing right now, we're communicating. Now, I've got a book about all of this, right? So let's call that the plan. But it's highly unlikely you reading that book, you're going to get as much out of it as me explaining it to you.
Right.
And that's what we forget. We build these great plans, we put them on a slide, we put our vision, mission, goals everywhere, and then that's the end of the exercise. We don't keep reinforcing it. We forget to communicate. And humans love communicating. It's why we go out for beers. It's why we go to the cafe with friends. Yet in business, we have meetings. We completely destroy the construct of how we communicate outside of business and have these highly formalized discussions where generally no one knows what's going on. People are just updating on their work. We're checking on each other rather than having this great plan where we've got simple objectives that people are going out to achieve. So briefing's important. We talk about when you're talking, you need to be structured, you need to be prepared, and you need to check that someone's listening to you. We call it a check of understanding. Then we go and execute. So it's a great plan. Everyone knows exactly what we need to do, and we walk out the door and we go and execute, right? And this is where we talk about task saturation. That poor old brain of ours, it's not very good. It doesn't work that well. And now that we've got these smartphones and all of these distractions around us, we're distracted every 2 minutes. And what that means is every time we're distracted, our brain consumes energy to refocus. So every 2 minutes, it's going through a 4-step process to focus on a task. Then we get distracted and it goes through the 4-step processes, focus on another task. So our brain is consuming all this energy jumping in between. To be focused is a 21-minute exercise. To get a 3X in the zone level of focus, no distraction, 21 minutes, and you might enter into that focus. Now, we've all been there. We all know we can get there, and it's usually the night before an assessment's due or some deadline. That's why we have deadlines, because as we come towards a deadline, people put their phones in their pocket, close themselves in a room.
I have to.
And how much productivity do you get?
Yeah, it's at least 3x,
It's at least 3x, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we do it because we have to. The same way as a fighter pilot does what they have to do because they have to. In between all of that, we're back in the cave, sitting on our asses because we don't want to do anything to conserve energy. Because
it's comfortable.
That's how we survive.
Yep.
Nothing's going to go wrong if you lock yourself in your house and do nothing. Right? You're going to survive.
Yeah.
So it's all about overcoming that what we call latent inertia, which is to not get the car started, to not get the momentum. So this task saturation and overload, got to get away from distractions. And then finally, the biggest tool or the most powerful tool is the debrief. And no industry does this. No industry. And I coach high-performance football teams. I don't coach them. I coach them in high-performance mindsets. And as well as very, very large and successful businesses. Debriefing is almost called ultimate accountability. It's creating a culture inside your team, which is we call nameless and rankless. It's the same culture a fighter squadron has. And what it means is if we set out to do something today and we had a mission or a business objective, at the end of the day or after the mission, we sit down and we reflect on it. And we reflect on it in a way where it doesn't matter if you're the leader or a team member, everyone in the room is treated as equals. And we just say, hey, look, here's the plan. Here's what we set out to achieve today. Did we achieve it? And we call it the 3 R's. What's the result? What's the reason for that result? And what's our response going to be? And the purpose of that is to look at this performance of a team, do it in a way where people can put their hand up and say, oh, look, I made a mistake today or I didn't achieve my goal. And for people to self-diagnose. The aircraft that I came from was a single-seat cockpit. So every mission we fly, and if there's 4, 8, 16 of us, we always work in units of 2, every one of us are completely responsible for our own execution. There's no one there to help. And we fly the entire mission virtually without speaking. Highly complex mission, 5-second time on target, flying at 1,200, 1,500 kilometers per hour. And that's how aligned and focused we get by following all of these steps. And then by debriefing, we just learn something every day. Just a little thing, just 1%. We call it lessons learned. But what we do is rather than learn it and forget about it, we take that lesson and we apply it the very, very next day. And by applying it, we eliminate that issue inside the organization and our performance improves. It always improves. And 1% per day, every day, it equals a huge amount of improvement to the point where we execute 98% of the missions we set out to do, we achieve. In business, it's down at 13.
Yeah, I was going to say, in business, you're just not getting those numbers at this point.
No, and what people don't understand is people think that this high-performance mindset means you've got to run marathons. High performance means work hard. High performance means you've got to be dedicated. You've got to be working Saturdays and Sundays. It's not at all. High performance is a mindset thing. And the thing about 3X doesn't mean you always get 3 times as much done as anyone else. It means you can have 3 times as much time off because you get everything done early.
Right. And
that's important too, to have a rest, to have a break. So it's really important. And I genuinely do not believe, and it's only because of the investment that goes into fighter pilots, I just don't believe any other industry, any other organization has that level of experience with understanding how far a human can go, what a human is really truly capable of achieving.
Well, it's definitely that upper limits, without doubt. I mean, you're looking at it's the most efficient form of capacity that I can at least think of at this point, right? I mean, like I said before, there's very minimal room for error, so you have to be as high performing on average as possible. So of course, you're always going to be at 100%, but on average, you have to be a lot higher because that margin of error is so less. But here's a question I was thinking of them, which I got a bunch. But when you're talking about the average employee or executive who you can look at and say, all right, there's a lot of areas where the minimum effective dosage can be applied. So there's a lot that you're doing too much. It's not giving you the output you need. Yeah. So what you're talking about with performance is how do I exponentially grow the output per the input put in? So how do I get you more for what you're putting in so you're not wasting time or energy and everything else? But when you're working with like athletes, for example, who are already at the top 1% or top CEOs and things like that, is there as much room? What are you working on in those areas for those guys that are at the top of the top?
Well, there's two different areas to focus on there. And what I'm going to do is not talk about athletes that are individuals because they have a slightly different approach to things compared to a high-performing team.
Right.
So the methodology applies because it applies to a single-seat fighter pilot just as much as it applies to a high-performance athlete. But 0.1% of the world is going to be a high-performance individual tennis-playing athlete. It's a very low percentage, whereas the other 99.9% of us, we're going to be part of a team. It's a given. And you're going to come out of uni and you're going to start at the bottom of a team, or you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to build a team, or you're going to be a CEO and you're going to run a team. The reality is we're all involved in a network of people, and let's just call that a team for argument's sake. So everyone has something to learn. Okay, the CEO and leaders, their principal issue is creating that situational awareness. For them, the challenge is providing clarity to a group of people. Because what you're talking about there, which is doing all of this work but not really being productive, that comes about due to a lack of clarity. And it might be someone heard the boss say something and they'll go and work on that for a week and come back and it'll be, oh, no, 3 days ago we decided not to do that. And that's because they don't have that culture of a simple plan that everyone's aligned to. And rather than meetings, we check in and we call these things X gaps, execution gap, where we always have discussions around the plan. It's always about the destination. It's not about how much work have you done today. Did you do what I asked you on Monday? And what happens is this is when the excuse matrix comes out where people find external reasons for not having done things.
Yep.
Because a lot of the time they just don't know what they're doing. And I've sat there and I've watched leaders deliver strategy and seen everyone nod their head. But when I ask them a question an hour later, they do not know what their role is in the execution of that strategy. I've worked with organizations for 6 months. It's taken 6 months for a team of 20 people to understand what their actual job is. And those 20 people, they're burning through $2 million in wages, and they don't actually know what their job is. And it's more common than you think. High-performance athletes sitting there about to go out and onto a field or to play a match, and they don't know what the plan is, even though they nod their heads. And this is all about the social element of human beings, where it's more important for us to be socially accepted than it is to actually do what we're told, because everyone accepts excuses, right? Because we all use it. We all use them. Everyone pulls out one out of the bag every now and again. I do it. It's our natural instinct, but you've got to check yourself and go, okay, I know the minute I'm using an excuse, I'm not taking accountability, I can't fix it because it's someone else's problem.
I like that. So for the pursuit of social compliance or level of compliance,
correct.
Within it,
I like that, social compliance.
Well, yeah, you're trying to not disrupt the status quo or even say, I don't understand this thing. But by acknowledging or trying to take control of your role within the orchestra, then you're able to actually make a difference within it. So if you don't actually know what's going on, you can't take accountability. If you can't take accountability, you can't take control, which means you can't actually change the result of what's happening.
No, you just make up excuses.
Right. I like that. Okay. I'm working through the logic here.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay. This is good. It makes sense. Whenever I repeat this out to anyone listening, it's just for me to try to work it out in my head, because if I can explain it out loud or to myself, then I'm going to get it. And then when I get it, I can talk about it to other people, which is one of the reasons why I got you here, is because, I said I read a few of your things online. Chris, if you don't, for anyone listening to this as well, if you don't know who Chris is, you Google him. We'll talk about some of the stuff he does. But I wanted to get my head inside someone who works in the high performance capacity from a behavioral change perspective, someone who's worked on the complete edge cases of people within business and athletes within Australia, right? Because I figure if I can learn, and this is why I do the podcast, is if I can learn from the high achievers in what they do and take something from that, I'm going to learn exponentially, that's even wrong, right? Exponentially, there we go. Not only am I going to learn more about what he does, I'm going to learn how to speak English. And that means I'm going to get more out of my time with you than I will 10 hours or a lot more with other people who don't know as much. So this is why I'm here. This is great. So one of the other things that I wanted to bring up that you brought up here, and I think is a very big, I'll say it's a personal challenge for me. And if it's a personal challenge for me, I'm going to project out and say it's a personal challenge for a lot more people coming up now, the youngers, is distraction. So one of the things you said before was about having clarity, having focus, knowing what to focus on, and not have task overload, know what to focus, get that 22 minutes of deep focus in, and then get your results out of that. One of the challenges I know I have, and a lot of people I've spoken to and I see have, is this world of multiple browsers. You're looking at one thing, and then before you finish that, you're starting another thing, and before I know what, I've forgotten what I've already started on the second thing there. Is this something you're seeing a lot of, and what are your thoughts about all that?
With distraction, there's nothing you can really do about it. I mean, it's conditioning. Your body is designed to refine that particular response, and the reason is it goes back to what I said before. It's survival. The whole point of being distracted is to hear the rustle in the bushes, the car horn beeping before you get hit by it. A distraction is designed to keep you alive when something happens you're not expecting. So we now have all of these systems that condition ourselves to become more distracted. And we're just not aware of it. We don't consciously tick over into the mode, which is like, oh, okay, I've got to stop doing this. And what I've learned is, and I learned from the interesting thing about having this methodology is you're still a human. You still exhibit all these traits. So what I do is I actually just allow myself, and I go, look, I'm getting distracted, but I'm just going to run with it. You know, I'm going to do, I get up at 4 a.m. I distract myself for half an hour reading the news, walk the dogs, have a coffee, and then I'll do a bit of work, and then I'll allow myself to get distracted again. But what I do is a switch goes on in my head, and I say, I am now going into distraction mode. I'm allowing myself to be distracted, and I enjoy it. I don't worry about being productive. I let it go. And then I say, okay, well, it's 6 o'clock. That's enough distraction now. I'm going into work mode, and I'll work for an hour, and then I'll allow myself to get distracted again. What it comes down to, managing distraction is all about, it's the same in health and fitness now. It's all about interval training. Your brain's not going to consistently think for 10 hours in a day. If you can get, with distractions now, you've lost 5 hours out of an 8-hour day being distracted anyway. So if you can just make those 3 hours really, really sharp, and you 3x 3 hours, there's 9 hours right there.
That's a very interesting thought. So we're inevitably going to become more distracted. So it's now more important than ever to be able to optimize the time that you have to actually get that work done. Another thing that you said there, which was interesting about making the distraction time permissible, that it's okay to be distracted. I interviewed a guy who's a UFC fighter, and one of the things that he did, because I asked him about how does he manage his stress before a fight, because I've gone in tournaments before, but not on that scale. And he said one of the things he's done, he's kind of worked through, is that he makes 30 to 40 minutes of time permissible just to be stressed out. So he'll go somewhere and say, okay, play out all the thoughts, all the things that I'm been trying to fight off constantly and try to control, let them come over. But once that 30 or 40 minutes is done, that's it. I have to get back to doing what I got to do. So that's an interesting crossover.
I agree with that, and everyone's different. Okay, so people have different responses to stress. Some people are highly stressed. Some people are inert, have low stress. And I think what's important, and what they teach you as a fighter pilot, is learn about yourself. Like figure it out for yourself, and that's what debriefing's about. It's just about looking at yourself completely objectively. And I had a very good friend I met, someone that influenced me a lot a few years ago, and he explained to me the whole concept of the ego and the fact that we make decisions about I deserve this or that shouldn't happen to me. I need. And debriefing is a way of getting rid of that and just saying, well, where did I want to be right now? Why am I not there? What am I going to do about it? And that's how you start to learn about this. Some people are more distracted than others. Some people are really good at focusing. And when you start to build a team and you acknowledge all of these things, again, that's when the power comes. That's when you really start to get exponential returns on time spent. So it's critical. But if you're not sure how to analyze yourself and do it in a healthy way, I'm not talking about becoming all anxious and completely performance driven. That's not good either. What you want to do is just once a day, just reflect on it and go in the morning, write down what you wanted to achieve. In the afternoon, did I get there or not? Why? And what am I going to do tomorrow? Like I said, rule of threes, try and get 3 things done. And the good thing about 3 things, 3 hours, 3x, you should be able to get that done. And if you're hitting 2 or 1, something's happened, and that gives you something to debrief and something to change tomorrow. And it's very powerful to actually know what you can do tomorrow to change something. That's huge. That creates hope, right? And everyone loves hope. And when you do that as a team, you all release serotonin, you bond as a team, and you just get better and better and better. And that's why there's organizations and teams that win all the time and organizations and teams that don't, because they don't follow all these incremental steps to unlock this latent power inside the individual and inside a group of individuals.
Who's doing this exceptionally well from what you've seen?
I think Silicon Valley. I think that's an area where they harness this. They are very objective driven. They have these whole agile and scrum movements. They understand in the dev world, and when they're building apps and products, there's always a reason. They don't just write code for the sake of it. No. Whereas when we're in a transactional world, or when we're working inside other businesses, which we call like a business as usual, you just rubber stamping. That mindset's not there because it's just the same thing again, the same thing again, the same thing again. You can break that up. The same thing can always be better. And by bringing the mindset in there, if you're working in a large organization, or you're working in, and we all get bored, right? Everything gets boring eventually. Even flying fighter jets got boring eventually. But you've got to be able to break it up by thinking this way, because every time you debrief and every time you come up with something new means, well, that's something else I can do. And you'll find in a lot of organizations anxiety around change. Everyone talks about, I need a change manager. I can't believe there's people employ someone to manage change. It's ridiculous. Like, you can't. Everything changes. It's
constantly changing.
Everything changes. Yeah. So to say you're an expert in change is to say I'm an expert in breathing. I mean, it's just what we all have to do. But again, what happens is, because we plan badly, because we communicate poorly, because we execute with task saturation and we don't debrief, everyone gets confused. And when we're confused and we don't know what the destination is, that equals anxiety, and that's why people don't like change. I'll tell you right now, mate, if people didn't like change, no one would go on a holiday. No one would make a new friend. We like change. What we don't like is uncertainty. And the good thing about this flex methodology, situational awareness equals clarity equals certainty, and everyone likes that. And that creates more power, unlocks more latent capability inside a team.
That's definitely struck a chord. With that certainty in mind, you know what role you can play above and beyond even what you've been asked, right? Because once you're clear about this is where we're headed, this is a role that I'm playing in that overarching mission, I can look at it and say, well, actually, this is something I might be able to add more value to. Now that I know this is the thing that I'm doing. It's one of the things that I've definitely come across in my time either running businesses or working with businesses is exactly everything you just mentioned. It's people just not actually know where the hell we're fucking going. Does a leader know which way we should be going here? And then they start in one direction, they start in another direction, you start losing faith in that.
For the leader, it's okay not to know as well. But what happens is the leader hides the fact that they don't know. And one of the reasons leaders don't know is because the world changes around them. So the good thing about the methodology, it acknowledges, and I've just been having these conversations with my team as we're looking at changing the way that we run a publishing business, and just sitting down and saying, guys, I've got a few ideas. I don't know what the best one is. What do you all think? Let's all work this out together. And then all of a sudden, everyone relaxes a bit. Everyone's got buy-in to the future. And collectively, you make a better decision. And you might make a decision just to get to Friday. You might not make a decision to get to the 1 year destination. And this comes about, like, particularly now in the economy, there's a downturn. There's no doubt about it. In retail and in
property,
consumables and property, there's a downturn. So that's putting a lot of pressure on businesses. So there's no point at the moment having some big lofty goal in terms of where you want to be in a year, because it's highly likely that's changed. So what we want to do is build some clarity around execution day to day. Because what happens when you go from an economy that's very buoyant, you become inefficient because everything's easy. The people that adapt quicker to that change and embrace 3X mentality, they'll survive because they will be able to trim all that fat, survive through a lean time, and then they'll build it up a bit later. At the moment, and this is more, I guess, a conversation for leaders, At the moment, now's the time. Now is the time to bring more clarity, to bring more efficiency and productivity in to survive and get rid of that fat overhead that we're all carrying as a result of coming out of a boom.
Dig the well now. Yeah. That goes back to what you were saying before about just you have to make those decisions. And that doesn't necessarily need to be that 3 or 5 year decision because of the macroeconomic factors, but you need to make that decision because that decision will open up another opportunity for another decision.
Correct.
But you just sitting there trying to work out what is going to be, what's going to happen next month and next year from now, all that time, that energy being invested into wondering, thinking, is preventing you from actually any progress. And that progress, like you were saying before, starts adding up these little continuums of energy, which you're no longer building. Another thing that you mentioned there, which just reminded me of when I interviewed Mark Randolph from Netflix, was I asked him, I said, being a leader, how do you control, your ego and things like that? He said, I never thought about ego. I had to put that aside. What had to work was realize that any ideas that came up weren't just my ideas. It was everybody's ideas. And if something went wrong, it was all of our fault. That's fine. But understanding that we're a collective is what allowed us, and we all had different experiences, and we all brought different pieces of DNA of different experiences over the years to those problems, to those opportunities, allowed us to come up with the things that created that exponential growth. So in his case, it was going from the original model to a subscription model, right? Yeah. Which completely changed the business and toppled Blockbuster. But the way that came about wasn't any single person's idea, and it wasn't his ego knowing, I know how to solve this and listen to me. It was exactly what you just said then. Same with your publishing business was, I don't exactly know if this is the right idea. Here are some ideas. Let's discuss it. And having that level of vulnerability made it permissible for other people to be more suggestive. So, okay, well, he's not going to be so egotistical about something I might suggest that may not be what he wants to hear, but what I believe is right. And that allows the innovation to kind of be built from.
Completely.
Yeah.
And when I say ego, a lot of people get confused. They say, I don't have a big ego. No, I know. Yeah. Ego's got nothing to do with arrogance or having a big ego. And one of the interesting ways I like to see if someone has an ego or not is you pick them up on something that you don't agree with. And you just go, okay, that's not a very good idea. And just watch how people respond. And if people go, oh, okay, no, that's valid. No, why? What do you think? Then you understand that person genuinely has no ego. But most of us will get very defensive.
How does that work in the world of debriefing then? Because for that to work, I'd imagine you'd have to check those egos and make everything as objective as possible, control the bias, right? So it's like as outcome driven as possible. This is what we set out to do. This is what actually happened.
It's cultural. It is absolutely cultural. It's not an active decision to say, okay, guys, we're going to go sit in a room. Everyone park your egos, go put them in the pigeonhole, put them back down with the helmets. We're going to go egoless now.
Yeah.
It is the culture from the very first mission you fly with your very first instructor. That is how it works. It is completely focused around the objective, what we set out to achieve, and then what actually happened. And that clarity allows a debrief to be very objective. The problem in most entrepreneurial enterprises in business is because the objectives are fluffy and ambiguous. They're all intent driven. When you debrief, it's too subjective. So it just becomes everyone's opinion as to performance rather than what actually happened. And then what you learn as a fighter pilot, and the same in business, is there's 3 or 4 ways to do something, right? You sit down and eat a meal. 4 people will use their utensils 4 different ways, but the objective will still be met. The food will get off the plate, into your mouth, and into your digestive tract. Flying a jet is the same. Running a business is the same. And what we learn in the debrief is whilst we might learn a lesson, it just might not be the way we want to do it moving forward. But that's not the value. The value is in the lesson, which is actually, that's a good idea, and I am going to do that moving forward. And we used to say there's a lot of ways in which to skin a cat. So the purpose of the debrief is to use it as an open-minded learning process, and it's an accelerator. It is an absolute accelerator. In business, because it's not cultural, what we find when we run our programs is you've got to actively facilitate. A fighter pilot in a flying suit, because of all the visual representation that brings, can actively facilitate that nameless and rankless culture. And we consider that to be a 90-day exercise, and we run a 90-day program to do that. 200 odd days to develop a habit. This is a habit, so it's a year's worth of investment in any organization to develop a debriefing culture.
Who, when you're building that culture, who are you specifically wanting to make? What stakeholders do you want to make sure are in that room?
The
when
leaders.
You're doing that? Yeah.
The leaders, because it only works when the leader puts their hand up first and says, I made a mistake, I fess up and I fix it. And it goes back to our point before. If I'm a leader and I'm not sure what the destination is, this is when I put my hand up and go, okay, team, here's where we want it to be. Here's where we are now. We've got to figure out why and what are we going to do about it when we walk out the door. And we get that collective buy-in. We call that open planning. So when we have a debrief and we're trying to figure something out, it's important that we have everyone that we need to execute the plan and execute on that objective in the room together, even if one person's missing. And we accept this all the time in business. Oh, so-and-so's on leave. Let's just do it anyway. And then the person comes back on leave. They're on a complete tangent. And that one person can derail 8 people very, very quickly. So this collaboration, we think collaboration is a beanbag and a fridge and an open plan office, right?
Yeah. Shout out to Google.
Yeah. But Google's smart as well. I mean, Google, we work with Google Afterburner, work with Microsoft, work with NFL teams, NBA teams, our NRL teams, cricket teams. And what you realize is those organizations are very objective focused and they're very discreet. You know, we're going to build a drone that delivers parcels. That's a discrete objective. A car that drives itself, all the way down to we might have a new widget inside a Gmail that works on a Samsung S10. Yeah, but everywhere, because there's a development process, because there's an investment in time and effort, the digital world is very, very objectives driven. Outside the digital world, we find it's not like that. But that's not to say digital's perfect, because what you end up happening is a brief to a developer being a bit wishy-washy, not clear, means you expend a lot of effort, and then when it's developed and you get the product, it doesn't look anything like it. You say, you say, I wanted you to design an apple, and it pops out and it's a Granny Smith, but what you meant was, oh no, I want a red one. Yeah. Oh, whatever you call those, gala. So that's the specificity that a fighter pilot understands. You've got to say it is a Granny Smith apple with a core with 8 seeds in it, and that spending the time and effort in that clarity means that you do it once, and that's why it's 3 times as effective. Because what you're actually doing is cutting out the 3 times you've got to go back.
Wrong.
So it all adds up. You're trimming a little bit everywhere. You trim a little bit off the plan, a little bit off the execution, a little bit off the debrief, but the collective is a 3x.
Jeez. This is one for the books. I'm getting some here. I like that because most of my businesses are and experiences in the world of digital. So one of the things you nailed there was that clarity in that briefing process, the clarity in the communication. Try to remove any area of ambiguity, but also I find trying to justify the insight as to why. I don't know if you would agree with this, but this is what I tend to do. I try to provide as much context into the thinking behind the brief as possible, so the person who's taking the brief and doing their job now understands the context behind it to say, okay, I kind of understand why he's also asking specifically for this thing as well. So then I can use my lens of expertise to say, I challenge that, or this is what I think, how I want to approach it. And also, the other thing you were talking about was the lean towards the Scrum Agile methodology, which is purely objective driven. You know, this is the outcome we want to have. This is what we expect the impact to be. This is the time frame. This is the resources. This is et cetera, and the cross functional element of it as well. How do you get multiple people from different expertise all working together under the same kind of lens to solve a problem?
You know where Scrum and Agile came from?
It has to be the military.
It's fighter pilot John Sutherland. John Sutherland was one of the inventors.
You know what? I knew it had to have been because he just seems so military-based.
Yeah, and it comes from the OODA loop. The OODA loop is the fundamental decision-making process for a fighter pilot. Observe the environment around you, orientate yourself to take advantage, make a decision, act, see what happens, observe, and start again. It's always about moving. So it's DNA, and John was a Top Gun pilot in the US Navy. So the methodology, it's even a circle. It talks about sprints. All of that methodology has its DNA in the fighter pilot culture and methodology. But people aren't aware of that. But one of the challenges is what's happened now is Agile is now moving outside of the dev world into mainstream. People are forgetting the reason. It's just become another buzzword for everyone coming in a room, sitting in a beanbag and being collaborative, and what's still missing. And when I look at Agile teams, and we come in to organizations after they've become Agile because of the chaos. And again, what we say is Agile's great, and you build a squad, you build your tribe, you build your guild. But at the end of the day, you can never get away from setting a simple plan with a clear objective, communicated to the whole tribe, the whole squad, have them execute without getting distracted, and then debrief together. You cannot get away from those 4 steps to get 3x. Doesn't matter what you call it. And that's the key, right? It's getting people into a room, getting them to focus, vulnerability as a leader, build situational awareness, go out and execute.
When do companies generally engage you? At what point would they go, we need someone?
I think traditionally for us, it's always been in terms of a launch, in terms of being something motivating, in terms of helping people understand that you can unlock your potential. So a lot of our programs are big keynotes or what we have like a full day or a 2-day program where we it's called experiential learning. So we highlight these human performance traits that everyone has. We let people participate in an exercise where they're not conscious of it, and then we debrief it at the end and we show them those human performance traits and why the 4 steps mitigate it. And that's when the light bulb goes off. And that's why we end up a 4.9 out of 5 on Facebook and Google, because there's a big light bulb moment. People go, and it's really cool to leave a program and say, I genuinely now know I can do something to increase my performance a little bit. People want it. Humans are great. Like I always see the good in everyone. And most people want to do a good job. Yeah. They're just not really sure how to do it, right? And then what happened as a result of that is we started to work a little bit longer with organizations. And they said, look, that's great. And then they would go and execute it. And they're like, well, our debriefing wasn't that good. Can you give us a bit more on the plan? And we will go in and actually coach the program, build a platform in which they can actually put their plans and execute on them. So it's become more all pervading. One of the problems we have, though, is it's quite hard to scale it. It's very hard for a non-fighter pilot to go in and explain to an organization how to think and act like a fighter pilot.
But do you guys do that? You guys only have fighter pilots that are part of the Afterburner coaching, right? So
that we only use fighter.
That's part of the
fighter pilots.
The start, right? Okay. Let's take a step back. So when did you first get into the Air Force? What year was that?
That was 94.
So that would have been just after the Gulf War, right? A few years after. I think it ended in 91, something like that.
Yeah, the first one. It's a good question. No, was it 99? I'm not sure.
91, I think it was.
Google. I should probably know that.
Oh, I probably could pull it up. Let's have a look. Gulf.
Yeah. Anyway, it wasn't long after Top Gun. Let's put it that way.
That's what. There you go. Yeah, 91 ended.
There you go.
And
I was in for the second one. That's right. Yeah.
So you were there for the second. You were there for Afghanistan, Iraq as well. I'm assuming during that time span, that was around 2001, 2004.
I was in the UK at that time, so I didn't deploy in combat, which is in some ways why my first business I set up in Kabul and went into that environment because I sort of felt to some degree that I'd missed it as a pilot.
Right.
So I got to fully immerse myself as a civilian in a war-torn country doing project work. So that was very interesting.
So why did you? Yeah. Okay. So why did you? When you? Can you talk about what the medical condition was that took you out of the Air Force?
Yeah, it's called ankylosing spondylitis. It's an autoimmune condition, which means your body just gets a bit confused with the proteins in there, and your immune system attacks healthy tissue. And predominantly for me, it's soft tissue in the spine. So that when you fly a jet, it's quite physical and puts a lot of pressure. Pull G-force, so your head weighs about 40 kilos. So you can imagine a 40-kilo head on a broken body.
Doesn't work out too well.
Yeah, but it was, you know what, like everything in life, everything bad is good. And it really taught me resilience because I guess while the other pilots had it physical and it was hard, you know, I had this medical condition that made it just even harder and incredibly painful when I was flying a jet and flying in these combat missions, in these simulated mock air battles called BFM. And it was so painful that the other pilots were able to walk up. We had 2-story buildings and the briefing room's on the top floor. I had to wait for everyone to walk up because I had to pull myself up on the railing because the pain in my sciatic nerves and down through my legs. I couldn't even lift my legs. So I'd have to pull myself up. And what it taught me was a lot about resilience. And again, it's a case of, and I was lucky. I don't know if I wasn't a fighter pilot and I didn't have that culture, I would have tried as hard. But because I was in that culture, I didn't want to let anyone down. It taught me you can do a lot with pain as well. And pain is just another excuse. So over time, I just learned that was something that I could manage. And then eventually just got the better of me to the point when I was in England flying a mission, my neck, it just stopped moving. It just froze for a month. I couldn't move.
You did not want that in the air.
And that was it. So then they kicked me out. So
what was it like then? Did you know what your next steps were going to be?
Not really. No, I just knew I wanted to be, if I wasn't in the Air Force, I wanted to be an entrepreneur and own my own business. And at that point in time, it was post-Gulf War II, post-Afghanistan, post-Iraq. And I read a book on starting a business and it said, there's just one passage. I'm not very academic, so I read it on my phone, but I don't tend to read so much in long form. And it said, if you're going to start your business, you must go somewhere where demand will always outstrip supply, because even if you run a business badly, you're going to succeed. And that was that part of the world. So my best mate and I, Tom, went over there. We set up our business, and it just grew very quickly. And I sold out of it after about 3 years, moved back to Australia, and Tom continued to take it on. It's sort of the second biggest humanitarian projects company in the world now. It's called CTG Global. C stands for Christian, T stands for Tom. So it was very powerful. It spiraled a bit out of control for us. The cash flow, as you can imagine.
That was your first actual business.
First actual business, yeah. And first contract was $2.8 million.
God.
We were running around, paying people cash in a third world country, no law. Getting, we would get paid. A truck would pull up and pull a few $100 bills off the back. All legit, all US government contracts.
Yeah.
And but as you can imagine, running a business where you have a huge payroll and long payment terms, and growing and growing and growing. We ended up selling a large portion of the business to a multinational to help us out, and then obviously we just continued to sell.
It's about jumping in the deep end, mate.
It was, yeah. And talk about ego. I thought then running a business is obviously easy. I've got this third world stuff nailed, so I moved to Papua New Guinea, tried something else, and failed dismally. So had to rebuild again. So a big part of what you do and the risk is, sometimes you do really well and you've got a lot there, and other times you got to rebuild. You got nothing, but you got to be comfortable with nothing. So I think for me, a couple of experiences. I was when I first joined my first fighter squadron up in Katherine. It was the 1 in 100 year floods up there, and my whole house, every single item I owned was completely destroyed. So I started up there at sort of 22 years of age with nothing, and you realise it's just stuff. And it got divorced, and you realise that's painful and it's really hard, and you kind of start again and separating again, and you just realise, it's hard. It's hard, but if you just lose the attachment and just keep going and just keep working and keep adjusting that destination. My destination is to be financially independent. The age of 40 is looking more like 50. I mean, truly financially independent, right? But stuff happens, and you can't afford to compromise on happiness to get there. A lot of people achieve financial independence, but they make a huge sacrifice for it. Yeah, and they make a personal or moral sacrifice. They make a family sacrifice. Their kids don't talk to them. There's a trade-off. Like yin and yang. There's a karmic debt everywhere. So for me, I guess my objective is to find a level of financial independence that's also karmically balanced.
That is probably one of the truest things, or the most resonating things someone has said to me in a while. It's an area that I've been thinking about a lot myself as well. It's that world of alchemy. What am I willing to trade to have the thing that I want, and what am I never ever willing to trade? I want to achieve the things that I want, but I want it to do it my way. I don't ever want it to compromise who I am as a person, or a certain moral, or a certain belief, or a certain something that's not me, in order to have that thing for the sake of it. Because
I learned that very early, because in the fighter pilot world, there's all different types, and there's some very successful fighter pilots, but they're absolute assholes. And I made this decision when I was a young pilot. We call it a BCAT. It means you pretty much can lead any mission. And I always had this philosophy, and what I realized is to be successful and to be an asshole is actually not that hard. It's not. I mean, it's quite easy, because you just shit on people. And that's not hard. So I made this commitment to myself, which was I want to be successful, but I want to do it as a decent person, and that's a lot harder. It's actually a lot harder to do.
I agree. I think it's because you're constantly in that balance mode. Whereas when I suppose people like ourselves that are willing to sell anything to get what they want,
out of focus, out of destructive focus. Exactly. That's good from a high performance mindset. But again, one of the key elements that comes into this is the moralistic and the human element. You got to be high performance and human at the same time,
which is, like you said, a lot harder.
Agree.
And so, how did you get into Afterburner? How did that all come about?
Karma. Again, just a random turn of events. So I just finished building, set up a company, built a hotel in Perth CBD.
As one does.
Which was pretty cool. It was a modular hotel, world's tallest modular hotel, which was really awesome. And as it got to the end of that, I was like, what should I do? And a good friend of mine was running Afterburner at the time. It's been in Australia for 15 years. And I spoke to him and said, "Oh, mate, I'll come and help you. I'll just give you a hand and see what we can do." And it just so happened he'd been he was the second owner of the business, and it's actually an American business, and we interpret it in an Australian flavour, obviously. And he just said, "Oh, mate, good timing because I want to get out." So I took the business over, and that was nearly 5 years ago. And for me, the reason I did that was I sat there when I was trying to make my mind up. I flew to America. I met the founder. It was all good, but it was like, maybe it's a bit naff and a bit, fighter. Who's going to learn anything from a fighter pilot? And then I watched a program, and I sat there. It was with an insurance company up in the Hunter Valley, around 200 people. And when they ran through the whole program, I just got smacked by this massive bolt of lightning, and my whole life just made sense all of a sudden. And I realized everything that I just observed a fighter pilot telling me, I didn't even realize because I lived it. But to see someone externally explain it and in the context of business, and that was it for me. I just went, wow, this is good stuff. And that was what really motivated me to get into it from there. And then the rest is history. And I love aviation. I love it. I bought Australian Aviation, which is our largest aviation publication in Australia. I got an airplane. I do Afterburner. So again, my karmic capital is high. I've got a lot of equity at the moment. So I'm balancing out, and there's some karmic debt going on as well, but I'm balancing it out. Like and I'm constantly grateful and aware that not many people get to live this sort of dream. I still get to talk and hang out with all the fighter pilots that I grew up with and flew with, and they're great mates. I get to hang out with my mates every day. I get to do fulfilling work where people come up at the end of the program and always say consistently, it's the best thing I've ever seen. I just ran a program last week, and the organizer came up to me and they said, in 10 years, we've never seen everyone come back after lunch. Every single person. They said most people go to bed. They've all got hangovers from the night before. Big company, big. And for me, that's what keeps me going. I mean, that is a fulfilling, content life. To do activity, to do work, to get paid, and for people to come up and say that. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, right?
Well, I think that's what everyone's looking for. How do you get paid to be fulfilled, to be important?
It was a 40-year adventure. I mean, it's be open to it, is what it is. Have a destination in mind, but always be open to things and have a passion. And for me, it's airplanes and flying and fighter jets. And now you get to a point in life where I think one of the things they teach you in the Air Force is this concept of servant leadership, where you truly believe as a leader your job is to fulfill the lives of others, not for yourself. And there was a survey, I can't remember who did it, I was reading something this year where the survey results were most people inside a company think, 69% of people in a company think the leaders are only in the leadership role for what they can get out of it, not for what they do as a leader. So what happens is I think you get to a point in life, and I was making a move into life coaching and just thought, well, I've done a few things. I've been a fighter pilot. I've lived in a third world country. I've run complex programs. I've had my staff, sadly killed in roadside bombs. I've experienced pretty much the full spectrum of everything you can do. And I lost my career as a result of a medical condition that was out of my control. I achieved my life dream at 21 years of age. So all these weird, I guess, things that happened. And I felt compelled to share that with people in a non-evangelical kind of fist pumping way. Afterburner kind of just popped into my lap, and it's that manifestation. I don't want to go too far down there, but it was really, I guess, fulfilling a destiny, but having a destiny in mind.
And like you said, being open to it.
I've been open to it. Yeah.
So all these events that happened to your life all suddenly made sense. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And now, because of what you're doing, you're literally changing the lives of all these different people that are.
Well, hopefully, just one or two anyway. But
one's enough.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think, and for me, it's a case of what I like about the method and what it's deliberately designed for. And they tell you when you join as a fighter pilot, they ask you very specifically, are you able to motivate yourself? All right, how much external motivation do you require? And for me, I've always been a self-motivator. Like, I've always wanted to be good at sport. Sadly, not. I didn't ever desire to be good at academics, and I wasn't. But I've always had that, right. And I think for a lot of self-motivated people, they know what to do, but not how. And that's what I like about the Flex method. It just gives some structure to people to actually go out there and win.
That makes a lot of sense. So you have these top leaders, entrepreneurs, people that are full of energy. Where do I put this thing? How do I make sense of this thing? How do I direct it in the right way? Because the flame's really open at the moment. We need to get it really narrow.
Correct.
And you're able to provide that clarity and structure to say, well, now I want to point you at the right dartboard now, and I'm going to give you the fuel to get there as well.
Absolutely.
That's good. And in terms of the coaching side, so you do one-on-one coaching as well?
I do less and less now, just due to time. Yeah, but right. and it's normally at more of a, I don't like the word elite, but a higher level of complexity. So leaders that have a very complex problem that they're trying to solve, or vast numbers of people that they're trying to manage and align. So I do some one-on-one coaching, but it's very much a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
And does that stuff generally evolve out of the kind of organizational change? Organizational management work that you do?
It does. Yeah, it comes out of a big program where it identifies that one of the issues inside that organization is a lack of clarity.
Right.
And I talk about like this. There's intent, like they want to do something. There's an intent to do something at the end of the year. But how do we get that down into granular execution? And that's what we help with. Because interestingly, for a fighter pilot, no other role in the military encompasses strategy and execution. Fighter pilots have to think strategically, but they also get in the jet and do it. So we've learned that simple strategy is the only one that you can execute, whereas organizationally, people that define the strategy generally don't go out and do it. They tell people what to do, and then they make up excuses. So there's not many careers and some athletes, individual athletes. So there's not many organizations or individuals that have that implicit connection between strategic thinking and day-to-day execution. But what I do find is a lot of companies don't want it. They don't want the accountability. The leaders find it a little bit too confronting, even to the point where we've gone inside organizations and they said, "This is fantastic, but we don't think our leaders are ready for this." And for me, I find that really sad.
It's bad leadership.
Bad leadership inside big organizations to say our leaders aren't good enough to be that accountable. So that's that for me. I kind of give up, because that's not you can't work with that.
No,
you can't work with.
No, they have to be open to the transformation for it to even begin, right?
Absolutely. They have to believe. They've got to have that mindset that you fundamentally can be. We can be better than we are, and that's not a lot of people who think that way.
And everyone has to take their role and responsibility in that betterment. Not it's everyone else, not me to change. Right.
Absolutely.
And in terms of the business itself, are you, because now did you acquire the Australian Aviation Magazine?
Yeah, that's right.
It's been around for a while, right?
Yeah, 42 years. Yeah, it's great. Super amazing to have the magazine. You used to put the posters up on the wall when you're a 6-year-old, and now own it. Like it's like it's a full circle. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Good on you.
Tough business. Don't get me wrong. It's terrifyingly tough, but it's good purposeful. It's a good purposeful endeavor.
So why did you, with as much as you've got on your plate with Afterburner, why did you go and pursue this?
It just popped up. It just appeared as out of a coaching discussion, and it was a simple idea. And with the Afterburner and the coaching, for me, it's quite instinctive. It really is. There's not a lot of preparation. There's not a lot of, I can literally intuit what's going on very quickly. It's facilitation. It's not about telling, and that's the key about our program. We never ever tell anyone what to do. We just guide them through a process, and it pops out. And because it's self-discovery, because it's driven by our clients, it sticks. And that's really important. The Australian Aviation business, there's obviously a team. There's a team there, so they execute. We build strategy together. But I'm not really hands on. I'm mostly hands on in our social, because the social is our personality. So I kind of manage that. But we have a top editor. We've got Steve Gibbons, who used to be the editor of the Courier Mail up in Queensland and run News Corp up there. We've got a great digital team. Everything about it is, we've just built a good, high-performing team.
Did you have to relearn, or what was new to you going into that business?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
I imagine.
Yeah. But that's the thing about leadership. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to be open to experts and build a destination by working with them collaboratively and go out and execute and just keep that mojo up. And, this is a challenging business model. We're still trying to figure it out. We've figured some of it out. We've had some wins, but we've also had some losses. So we're in this, we're in publishing, information is all pervading. Your podcast is now a form of communication and content that didn't exist, 10 years ago when the magazine was a powerhouse. So what we have is we're morphing into this new world of digital, which is slippery, it's huge, it's hard to maintain copyright, everything is all over the place. So we're just trying to figure out the best way in which to provide what is a great service and really good content, but in a way that's monetized fairly.
How are you going about solving those challenges?
It's about providing a level of experience that has value attached to it. So news, for example, is all pervading. So news, to commoditize and monetize news is impossible, because if they're not getting news from us, they'll be getting it from someone else. So you've got to build a business model where news and free content is part of the service. And we, 70% of the people that engage in our content, they won't be paying for it. They're just going to be reading free news, and that's fine. But it's short form reading. It's a quick buzz on a news feed. You've got an hour, you've got a couple of minutes on the bus. Then what we monetize is our long form content, our deeper. When we're finding that 1 hour of the day to be focused, not the 5 hours being distracted. And that's for people that really want to engage in the industry, really want to learn, where we're talking about doing deep dives on airlines, on airliners, on particular aircraft, where you're going to be spending 10 minutes engaged in the content. It's all well and good to be watching Netflix and Stan, but you can't do that at lunchtime. You can't do it on the bus, or you can't do it when you're flying on an airplane. But these are environments where people do have the ability to focus on something, and we want to provide that editorial content for them to read with a bit more time, and that's what we monetize. And then the paper edition in the magazine, rather than being sort of quasi-news focused on a monthly cycle, we move into a journal style. It's bi-monthly, deeper content, more engaging, where people might spend 2 months reading it rather than page flipping it back to front in the day. So it's just trying to understand, and we engage our readers and try and get feedback from them, but it's a lot of unknown there. So we've got a great idea, we've got a plan. Is it going to work? I don't know. We're just going to keep trying things, and as we try things, what we've seen is, we took our Facebook followers from 10K to 60K in a year, 0 to 14,000 Insta followers in a year. Our website tripled in traffic in a year. So we know that there's engagement. We know we're doing the right things there. But like everything in digital, monetizing it is now the issue. And I think where monetization happens in publishing is quality and the whole fake news movement. Getting away from that and finding just that small community of people that have a genuine interest or a passion for aviation, that want to see the facts. They don't want to see a story on news.com.au or Sydney Morning Herald with the wrong airplane in the wrong photo with the wrong information. We're trying to explain an aircraft crash an hour after it's happened, which is, everyone in aviation knows, is impossible. Right.
So this is distinguishing that. This is the premium industry related magazines that can help people that are enthusiasts in that world find a place to feel more at home and part of the community of people that really equally care about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, they're just engaged in. They just love things that fly, and I mean, who doesn't? I mean, flying. Just think about it. It's amazing. We get so used to it on an airplane, but you think about what's under your feet. Nothing. Like, it's amazing. These things, big metal objects, just getting through the sky.
Yeah. Listen, as I said, I don't know how you guys, especially in the Air Force, you're flying something going at that speed. Just conscious of your time, because we're going to move on. Okay. Let me ask these last few questions. Do you have any children? Two kids. Good on you. If you could provide them no money, network, or name, what 3 beliefs or values would you want them to have?
Everything's going to be okay in the end. Find what you love, and never give up.
Beautiful. I have 2 children of my own, so I ask that question so I can understand these things and hopefully pass them on to my own children. And the last question is, where can people find you and follow you and get some more information?
For the coaching and performance side of the house and getting the 3X from your team or yourself, it's all in afterburner.com.au. We've got our podcast like this one stacked in there. There's quite a lot of content, and everyone calls me Boo when it comes to this world. So boo@afterburner.com.au. That's if you want to get in touch with me directly. I'm always available, always got a bit of time to have a chat. So, but Afterburner, wherever you are in the world, Afterburner will help you to achieve exactly what it is you want to achieve.
Love it, Boo. Well, thank you very much, mate. And we'll have to catch up over a little bit more of a relaxed situation with some wine and some beer or something like that.
Fabian.
All right,
Thanks
buddy.
very much
Thank you very much.
All
Thanks,
the best.
buddy. Bye-bye.